Well, good evening, and thanks so much for the introduction. It really is a great pleasure to be here this evening, and thanks for spending a little time of your Monday evening. It's great for me to be back in Ohio. I live in Milwaukee now and cheer for the Milwaukee Brewers, but I'm an Ohio native and have to confess I still root for the Cleveland Indians. Sorry, Guardians, right? Can't get used to that, or maybe I refuse to get used to that. I hope that your school year is off to a terrific start and that any nerves that you may have had when you arrived on campus have been replaced by the excitement of the college experience. It really is a special time in your life. And I've been assured by the talented faculty here at Franciscan that this is a place where students can comfortably express their love of country, speak freely, and share their Catholic and Christian values. In other words, it's almost unlike every other college campus in this country. So it looks like I'm finally in the right place. And wow, this is really refreshing. It's fun to be here. In all seriousness, I do want to address how invaluable it is to experience these philosophically formative years of your time here at the university, and that truly embraces critical thinking and freedom of speech. The university's new entrepreneurship program will encourage the next generation of hardworking tinkerers, innovators, risk takers, and doers, which is very aligned with our free market focus. Franciscan's faith-based approach naturally lends itself to cultivating individuals who are engaged in the institutions of civil society, whether it's volunteering at a local food drive, starting a neighborhood association, or going to church. Franciscan is also immersed in the formation of citizens who value America's founding principles. Further, your professors are teaching you how to think, not what to think. This last point should be a real concern for your generation. Freedom of speech, diversity of thought, even the basic premise of the country's founding are all under attack in ways that we just haven't seen before. We should all be deeply concerned about the attacks on freedom of speech, especially at institutions of higher education. As your career unfolds, you'll constantly need to pivot and adapt. You also need to learn to work with people who have vastly different opinions and viewpoints from your own. I urge you to embrace, rather than resist, this reality. While we may vehemently disagree with someone or even find their views offensive, we must respect their right to speak. Free speech is truly the hallmark of an open, flourishing society. But I'll take that a step further. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to become friends with at least one person with whom you disagree. A poll came out several years ago that was very troubling. 1 in 6 Americans has stopped talking to a close friend or even a family member because of the 2016 election. And I suspect even more so with the 2020 election. That's crazy. We simply must be tolerant of people with different perspectives, because if we fail to do so, our survival as a country is in jeopardy. Let's win the battle of ideas, but let's do so in a civil and engaging way. A colleague and fellow Bradley board member, Princeton professor Robbie George, recently said something that I think is sound advice for what we're experiencing right now. He said we must be a little more forgiving, a little more understanding, a little more willing to listen and not just preach, a little more willing to let the person on the other side unsettle you by challenging your deepest, your most cherished, even identity-forming opinions. The competition of ideas is what leads to human progress. We're so lucky to live in a country that has always valued the marketplace of ideas. And because of our democratic system of governments, we get to vote on them every 4 years. Indeed, another aspect of American exceptionalism. I was asked to speak about some of my own life experience, and one that stands out reminds me of how lucky we are to live in America, despite its flaws. During my time in Prague as United States ambassador, I had many conversations with my Czech driver. His name was Karl Sedlak, about what his life was like in what was then Czechoslovakia before the fall of communism. Karl, a very humble, uncomplicated man, often spoke about listening to Radio Free Europe on a transistor radio under the covers of his bed as a child and young adult. Now, how many of you actually remember those little handheld radios we called transistor radios? I imagine not too many, maybe none. But that radio, that little battery-operated radio, was his only link to what he thought could be a better way of life. He believed that a free and open society would be a better society for himself and for his family. And ultimately, after the fall of the Soviet Union and the liberation of Czechoslovakia, it's why he subsequently applied to work for the United States Embassy and stayed there for more than 20 years, driving United States ambassadors. It's so very easy to take our freedom and liberty and choice for granted when you've never known anything else. We must consciously fight to not do that and always work to improve and sustain our democracy in every way we can. In my view, it's real hard to disagree with Winston Churchill when he said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. Winston was right. One thing is for sure, and is our elections. It really does make a difference who wins and loses. And I say this as someone who has seen plenty of wins and losses during my time as chairman of the Wisconsin Republican Party and as a candidate who got clobbered in my one and only run for a state legislative seat in Wisconsin. Needless to say, that was a humbling experience, but ultimately it was a really beneficial experience. And that brings me to the other part of my message tonight, which is that America needs each of you to give back so that the ideals that made it possible for you to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are there for future generations. And I think that really means being civically engaged. Caring about elections means much more than caring about presidential elections every 4 years. Arguably, local officials have much more impact on your day-to-day life than the president or your United States senators. Mayors, councilmen, state representatives, state senators, school board members, state court judges are all really important in our democracy. Research the candidates, work at the polls, get involved in a campaign. If you're really motivated, run for office, but by all means vote. I'd also encourage you to make the most of your college experience, which is really a unique period in your life. Do your best every day. Soak up new ideas. Challenge the conventional ones. Of course you'll have days when you just don't feel motivated. Try to think of each day of life in this country as a gift in which you have the freedom to give it your all. There are no limits. And after you graduate, be open to paths you hadn't even considered, even if it means lower pay. In my case, I've been a lawyer, I've been an ambassador, a corporate executive, now a foundation president. Other than the lawyer part, none of the above were part of the original plan. And there's a lesson there. Plan to expect the unexpected and go for opportunities when they present themselves, even if it makes you a bit uncomfortable at the time. In my case, I left a very good job at a Milwaukee law firm for a government job overseas that paid a whole lot less. But as I look back, which of course is much easier to do than making a decision in real time, it's the best thing I ever did for my career and my family, because it's led to so many different and interesting adventures and life lessons. Just a few stories from the Prague days to make the point. I learned some really interesting things about topics that I just never could have imagined worrying about. My big issue in Prague for the 3 years we were there, from 2006 to 2009, was, as was mentioned, helping to institute a missile defense system. President Bush wanted to put a radar system into the Czech Republic and missile interceptors into Poland to protect against Iranian rockets. That was the purpose. The Russians hated the idea to have a missile defense system that close to their border they thought was a threat to them, even though it was never intended to be a threat to them. I was immersed in this every day for 3 years. We got very, very close, passed the Czech Senate, Treaties were signed. All we needed was a vote of the lower house, the Chamber of Deputies. I know we had the votes some days to achieve that vote, but we ran out of time. It became clear that Barack Obama was going to be elected president. It became clear that John McCain was not going to succeed George Bush, and the idea faded away. And indeed, Barack Obama killed the program shortly after he took office. He made a trip to Prague early on, and that was the end of three years of work. And you just wonder if Vladimir Putin would be quite so bold had we been successful in that mission between 2006 and 2009. If that missile defense system had been in place, would he have gone into Ukraine and so forth? We don't know, of course, but it's interesting to speculate. Other lessons from the time in Prague, which was just a sort of a surreal way to live as an ambassador. I did things I never would have done before. One example was my wife and I went skydiving one day. That's just not something I would have done. But our Army attaché came up to me one day and said, "How'd you like to jump out of a Russian airplane, Russian helicopter, with a Czech special operations guy strapped to you? He's done 25,000 jumps. You'll be just fine." I said, "Well, okay." Then I asked my wife, I said, "They want you to do this too." And, I said, "You sure we want to do this?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely." So there we were, going up 12,000 feet in an old Russian helicopter strapped to this Czech guy. And we each took our turns jumping out of this helicopter. And it actually was great public diplomacy. There were lots of TV cameras when we hit the ground. And it was a good day. And it was actually very fun and exhilarating, but I haven't done it since. So I think I also learned to laugh at myself a little bit more. We had been in Prague for about a week, and we lived in a beautiful residence. The ambassador's residence in Prague is pretty amazing. It's a 100,000 square foot palace, massive, massive place. And I was giving a speech to the group we had in that night about the residence and the history of the residence. And I urged everyone, after I was done talking, to walk around the first floor, not realizing that in Europe, the first floor is the second floor. And I couldn't figure out why everyone was leaving my speech, walking upstairs to our bedroom to tour the first floor, which is exactly what I had asked them to do. I just didn't know that the first floor was really the second floor. And the house manager stood there shaking his head at this crazy American who had people walking all over his residence in places that they shouldn't have been. So it was fun, and it was funny in retrospect. Another lesson is just good things happen when you work hard and you do good work. My political experience in Wisconsin led to Prague. The Prague experience led to Honeywell, where I had a chance to meet and work with Doug and so many other amazing people, including a really amazing leader, our CEO, Dave Cody. And then the foundation opportunity popped up, and it was a chance to go home and work in a really interesting area. I'd never worked in philanthropy before. So it all works out. And the overall lesson is you just never know. Work hard, do good things, and good things will happen. It just does. Not always exactly in the timeline that you hope it might, but it works. I think working and living abroad also instilled in me an even deeper appreciation for how exceptional America is, despite its many challenges. Even now, when I visit my friends and former colleagues in the Czech Republic, as I did just a couple of weeks ago, we were in Prague, they still see America as a beacon of hope. But they do express concern about the direction in which we're headed. They see the political and cultural division. They see the mismanagement that happened in Afghanistan. They see this woke ideology, rampant inflation, and they wonder how long they can continue to rely on America's word. That's why we need organizations like the Bradley Foundation and its grantees to restore, strengthen, and protect the institutions of American exceptionalism. And it's why we so urgently need your generation to stand up against a culture that is gravitating towards socialist policies policies which lead and are leading to family and community fragmentation, slow economic growth, government intrusiveness, and a lack of trust in our institutions. While there's no magic wand or silver bullet to solving the problems facing our country, I do know that if each of you gives back in some small way, the difference cumulatively will be enormous. What's important is to take that initiative. Our country, our future, our common beliefs and values that make America a land of opportunity depend on you. It's now your turn. What are those common beliefs and values? First, there's a dignity in everyone, every single person, and a special dignity that comes from work and making your own way. Second, free speech should unite us, not divide us. Third, we live in a marketplace of ideas and have the privilege to elect the people who we believe represent the best of those ideas. Fourth, every person has value and can and should contribute. And fifth, community and culture really do matter. Stay connected to friends and family by having conversations and spending some real time together. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm happy to respond to your questions, and as we said before, anything is fair game. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Appreciate it.